Now, I've been asked to, give this talk on credit and how this credit education will lead to financial inclusion. We are all discussing financial inclusion, so I will just touch upon what financial inclusion is all about in India and elsewhere. So first, let me begin with the word credit. In fact, the organizers have very cleverly clubbed three very important things together: the credit, education, and financial inclusion. So let me start with the most important thing, credit. Now, credit, if we all know what the credit is all about. We talk of, credit analysis, financial analysis. But even if you see the dictionary meaning of credit, it is very simple and it conveys the meaning very well. It says that any customer, ability of a customer to receive goods or services before making payment based on the trust that the payment will be made later or in future. And as our friend, Clive Humphrey, mentioned that, the credit culture, is very important, and what is most important in credit culture is the trust. So this dictionary meaning also brings out the credit thing very clearly. Other meaning is, in a dictionary, is that credit is, it's a lending or borrowing in a credit arrangement. And if you see the dictionary, the synonyms are, financial standing, of financial status and solvency. All these three words are very important. What we all do in our, in credit analysis is finding what is the financial standing of the borrower, what is the financial status of the borrower, when we do our financial analysis and all, and what is the solvency. We take out, we see ratio, we do the ratio analysis, quick ratio, acid test ratio, current ratio, all these ratios we calculate. We all know. So the credit, basically, in the meaning itself, it talks of everything. Now, I will just touch upon, this why credit education. Chairman of this panel has made it very clear that credit education is so very important for all the functionaries, those who are in this credit space, whether they are credit delivers, they are delivering credit like, investment banks or the banks, investment banks, or the syndicators, or maybe the credit receivers, maybe the corporates, the government corporations, individuals, for individual credits, and even the intermediaries like rating agencies, fund houses, brokers, and even the wealth managers and the private bankers. All these people, they for them, knowing about the credit is very important. The credit education is, very important for everyone. So that is what this, we are trying to, bring out, that this credit education is not only important for the person, those who deliver credit, it is also important those who are receiving credit as well as those who are the intermediaries, helping, delivery of the credit, and even the wealth managers, those who have to tell their customer, what is a good or what is a bad credit. And now how this credit education is helpful, for financial inclusion is very important. We have to understand that, now I will just try to build up, how it is important, how credit education is a torchbearer for financial inclusion. Financial inclusion is something, this gained importance in 2000. When United Nations found that in African countries, people were, those who were, poor, they were not getting, financial services. And then they found that, this financial inclusion is something, which is, getting financial services at affordable cost, and how it can be done. So for that, they came out with various things. They said, okay, you do this, you do that. Similarly, in India also, Reserve Bank of India has also, taken initiative, and they have also said that you have to have, for credit inclusion, like, no frill accounts, where accounts can be opened without, balance and no charges for various services. Then they have started, the service like general purpose credit cards. Reserve Bank of India has also, authorized banks to open, branches in non-bank areas without even obtaining, permission from the Reserve Bank of India, and they can simply open branches and report. And the purpose of financial inclusion basically is threefold. One is that it is for creating a platform for inculcating the habit to save money. See, these people, those who are, from the lower society, lower strata, from the society, they are not able to save money because they have no habit, and they have a habit of, saving, in the form of various other products or assets like land or gold, and they are always vulnerable. Whenever they need money, they don't have money. So Government of India thought that, this financial inclusion, to inculcate the habit of saving, they should be allowed to open banks, and that is why, as he mentioned, our Prime Minister has, started that, scheme of opening account for everyone. The second purpose of financial inclusion is providing formal credit avenues. These people, they don't have access to credit because they are, they're financially they are weak, poor. So this is another reason that, in financial inclusion, that, they should be, the cheap credit should be available to them. That is why, we are insisting that, the banking services should be available to everyone. And third is to, which is very important, which we were discussing, the plug the gaps and leaks in public subsidies and welfare programs of the government. We all know that whatever the subsidy is, granted by government, it is not 100% which reaches the ultimate beneficiary. It gets lost. I will not go into, this why it gets lost. But now they in financial inclusion, they have said, the credit should be made directly to the account so that they can get the benefit directly. So you can understand that, this, when we educate, we have the, this credit education to all the functionaries of in the credit space, how we can lead to a good, financial inclusion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Gupta. Good evening, sir. Yeah.
One of the best books that one can come across in recent times has been by Satyajit Das called Traders, Guns and Money, a book with a very explosive title. Here, guns means financial innovation which goes actually against the customer. One of the striking features of this book is that he has used the term called financialization, a word which has now become a standard lexicon in the world of banking and investment banking. Banking was actually an old boys club. I knew somebody, I give you a loan because my grandfather knew your grandfather. It was an old boys club, and it was not the kind of a massification of the credit culture. So references were made, proper due diligence took place, etc. Unfortunately, what happened was, since 2004 onwards, we had this phenomenon called originate to distribute, where the purpose of the loan was mainly to distribute. You originate a loan so that you can distribute, very much a financial equivalent of musical chairs or passing the parcel, if you will. And it's not an originate to distribute with a view of getting over your asset liability mismatch, but when distribution becomes the very purpose of origination, it becomes an end in itself rather than a means to an end, then as far as the markets are concerned, the markets get contaminated with these products because the origination is faulty. The crux of the problem is that nobody in the market who is handling a credit instrument has any knowledge about the granular details, and that is where the good old-fashioned banking system of due diligence is required once again. It's actually back to the basics, where we try to find out in a classroom that there is a difference between financial statement analysis and financial analysis. Financial analysis is the wider canvas, and financial statement is one of it. You can crunch the numbers, you put the numbers from a schedule 3 or a schedule 6 into the computer and you generate the ratios, fine. But what about the financial analysis? What about getting to know the borrower better? So this calls for a due diligence review. Skills have to be developed. Due diligence review consists of 4 parts. It's financial due diligence, business due diligence, technical due diligence, and the legal due diligence. All 4 of these must also pass through the scanner. And finally, you get to a decision, a credit decision that yes, this proposal is credit worthy. So we are, let's say, National Stock Exchange is the 4th largest exchange in the world as far as volumes are concerned. We have algorithmic trading and things like that. We're doing very well on the capital market front, but we need to go back to the basics as far as the origination part is concerned. As far as individual loans are concerned, the inclusion part, earlier in the 90s, we used to do lending, credit lending. We used to look at 10 proposals, maybe reject 5 and decline because we say, aha, there's a weakness in this proposal. But nowadays, standard banking is you run the proposals, 10,000 of them through a machine, and then you say, okay, I'm willing to take a 5% loss. So loans are appraised and disbursed almost on a statistical basis. As far as the credit culture is concerned in India, one is that there is an amount of loan aversion in the conservative middle class families. But what happens is when aggressive marketing takes place, then the individual consumer needs some defense mechanism. Otherwise, what could happen is, if you look at the aggregate of the individual balance sheets of the retail borrowers, you say, let's say, use a credit card and you buy an electronic gadget and you do that month after month, year after year, then what happens is on your individual balance sheet, you have assets which are depreciating and your credit card liabilities are compounding, and that's the beginning of a blowout. So when you have derivative credit instruments based on these, you're getting weaker and weaker instruments. All said and done, there is also this Asian culture, a wonderful Asian institution called the joint family system, where you build up cash reserves in order to take care of your future contingencies. Now that system has gone down, and therefore the number of people who are coming for loans is going to be much more, and therefore due diligence is going to be much more important. That's it from me. And then courses like NISM and Credit CCRA are just the starting point. But basically you become a good judge of credit worthiness by going through the number of cases, because credit judgment is highly nuanced. The books cannot teach you everything. So practice makes perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kauri. You want to speak from here as you like.
Thank you. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. I'll start with the structure of the capital market. So if you look at the capital markets worldwide, the total equity capital out there in the world, which is if you total up all the market cap of all the indexes out there, it's about $50 trillion versus the debt market, which is 3 times of that number. In the morning, you heard the chief guest, Mr. R. Gandhi, and he gave numbers about statistics about how the raising of debt has almost gone 10 times in the last 10 years, and it's almost growing at a exponential state every few years. Now, considering that particular fact, we have 75% of the capital market in debt, and still 75% of the people sort of either are looking at equity as an asset class when investing, or from education perspective. Whether you talk about your MBA, whether you talk about graduation, you all learn DCF or equity analysis from the very beginning, but nobody teaches you fixed income analysis or credit analysis from that perspective. So there is a mismatch over there in terms of the market size and the kind of professional who are trying to make a career there. Just like your hunger, sleep, credit education is a basic need. It just doesn't mean that you need to make a person literate, but it means you make a person more literate in terms of so that they can take their credit decisions better. It's all about the downside protection which we want to sort of avoid. Ultimately a consumer, nobody is worried about upside. Everybody is worried about losing his money, and that's where the financial literacy and the financial credit culture comes in. And I'll end my note with a small, research report. There was a research report done by an international broker, which gave us statistics in terms of which are the most over-covered stocks. So essentially, if any stock is covered by more than 50 brokerage houses, it's an over-covered stock. And they did a search on the entire world, and they found out that there were 51 equity stocks which are most over-covered. So there are 51 stocks in the world which are covered by more than 50 analysts. Two of them were obviously Apple and Intel, which all of you know, which would be over-covered. But the remaining 49 of those 51 stocks are in India. So you can see the extent of the kind of madness which people have in terms of analyzing equity, and with the kind of massive infrastructure build out, the kind of credit expansion we are looking at acute shortage of credit professional, and that's precisely the point we had in one of these capacity building committees which RBI had put up. With that, I'll end my note and hand over to the chair.
Thank you very much. So summing up, now I thank all the speakers. Clive has talked about the trust, what we in banking call fiduciary relation. Same thing for the people who do a lot of investment in the stock market, in the securities market, bond market, with insurance companies, with pension funds. So all have the relationship of trust, and the education is to enable us how to keep trust. Then Mr. Gupta talked about this credit culture and the financial inclusion part, and Mr. Korivi talked about the education part in the capital market, the differentiation between financial analysis and financial statement analysis, the macro and the micro concept. And naturally, Mr. Bihari Lal has talked about the very important part of the session, that all of us are irrational. If you go by the book way of going for a simple equity analysis, as your investor guidance will tell you. So if I'll take a few questions, if you have any, a limited question you can raise. Otherwise, please.
More than a question, I thought I'd just share an experience that we've had on credit education. I work with CRIF Highmark. We are one of the 4 credit bureaus in India today. We began offering services to microcredit borrowers, essentially people who only know how to spell their name in the vernacular, and sometimes they don't even know that. When we started in 2010, most of the lenders to this sector had book-based systems to record loan repayments, no information digitization. Today, the same set of lenders on a weekly basis provide repayment information for 125 million loan accounts. And these borrowers, remember that when we started in 2011, that was when the Andhra Pradesh crisis had hit. And what has happened, what we've seen is that between 2010 and 2014, the borrower base has increased. The NPAs, the new NPAs have come down and are much, much lower than, let's say, the education loan NPA at IIM Ahmedabad branch of State Bank of India. The average ticket sizes have gone up. Lending to this sector has increased. And we've had this ringside view where we've been able to talk to the borrowers in the vernacular. And we faced the responsibility where they have told us that I am not getting the loan because of you. So that is the impact of education, that in an industry where false declaration earlier was 97%, within a year to 18 months, the rate of false declaration came down to 10 less than that. So I thought it was pertinent enough to share, because it, 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 it proves the point that with education, when you action what you educate, that is when you make your portfolio safer. And in the end, it's beneficial to the borrower, because when the regulator is looking at the sector, the regulator feels that the sector is much more safer. The lenders to the sector get more access to credit. Distribution is used as a means and not an end. And the end borrower is actually benefiting. And we see some of these borrowers who are now migrating to higher ticket size loans from traditional retail banking channels also.
Thank you, thank you. I'll just embellish your statement a little more. The crisis in 2011, which happened, is not due to education. What you have provided as a provider of service is enabling them the access, fine. But when the question of trust comes, when you are writing that it is 24%, it should not cumulate to 45%.